Hi, I'm Michelle the Irritable Vegan. I'm here to share my vegan low FODMAP story and hopefully take some of the BS out of IBS. Now today I'm answering a question that I hear again and again. Do you need the Monash app to do a low FODMAP diet? Let's see, shall we? So to answer the question, do you need the Monash app to do a low FODMAP diet? The simple answer is no. It's perfectly possible that you or someone you know has been recommended to and followed a low FODMAP diet without referencing the work of Monash, and that particularly applies to people here in the UK, and I'll get into that in more detail in a second. But I think the real question we should be asking is not do you need the Monash app, but should you do a low FODMAP diet without it? And in my personal opinion, the answer to that question is no, and here's why. So for those of you who are not familiar, Monash University are the pioneers of the low FODMAP diet. So historically there has been research into why and how certain foods can aggravate digestion and in particular IBS symptoms. But the term FODMAPs and the way that the findings are presented to us today as a low FODMAP diet are due to the work of the gastroenterology department of Monash University, which basically makes them the world's leading authority on the low FODMAP diet. So to me, following a low FODMAP diet without referencing the work of Monash is a bit like buying an IKEA fitted kitchen and throwing away the instructions because you think you can figure it out by yourself. So now that we know exactly who Monash are and why they should be your number one go-to resource for all things FODMAP, why is it that so many people are still tackling this frustrating and confusing diet without them? So here are the three main reasons that I've determined why people are still going it alone. And hopefully if any of these apply to you, then by the end of this video we'll have you all aboard the Monash train to FODMAPville. Choo-choo! Monash? Who is Monash? So the number one reason why people might not be making best use of the Monash app alongside their own low FODMAP diet is simply because they've never heard of them. Now if you're watching this from the US or Australia, I know that that might sound incredible, but here in the UK, particularly for people who have sought help through the NHS, it's perfectly possible. So basically the original research that's been done by Monash University has been taken and adapted for UK patients by King's College London. So all of the dietary recommendations, any booklets or printed materials, and even the recommended app here in the UK are all branded and distributed by King's College London. So it's perfectly possible, like myself, that you've seen an NHS dietitian, you've been put on the low FODMAP diet, and nobody has ever referenced the work of Monash. So if this applies to you, it doesn't mean that you've done the diet wrong or you've had any kind of inferior experience. Basically, King's College have taken the initial concept of low FODMAP diets as presented by Monash University, and they've applied that to their own research and development programme, which has been responsible for testing thousands of foods and brands that are predominantly available here in the UK. Now there are some differences and discrepancies between the two apps, but generally speaking, if you feel that your symptoms are being well managed by following the King's College protocol, then stick with it. Though I will say that from my own personal experience, I found the Food Maestro app, which is the app that's been done in conjunction with King's College, to be very slow and glitchy. It didn't seem to be updated as often as the Monash app, and from my experience and from my perspective, it seemed to be much more suited to non-vegans and to people who rely a lot on pre-packaged or ready-made meals. It's got some interesting features that are different from the Monash app in that it actually has a barcode food scanner, but again that's only really useful if you're able to eat the types of products that are contained within the database of the app. So just out of curiosity, if you're here in the UK, which is currently the only place that the Food Maestro app is available, I'd love to hear in the comments below if you'd like for me to do an in-depth side-by-side comparison of the two apps and give you my impressions of the pros and cons of following the advice of one institute over another. So another reason that you might never have heard of Monash is because you've been told by a well-meaning doctor to go away and cut out certain food groups such as wheat and dairy just to see if it makes a difference to your symptoms, and they've referred to this as doing a low FODMAP diet. Alternatively, you may just casually be exploring the diet on your own terms without having any professional guidance through it. And again, you haven't particularly come across anything either online or in person referring to Monash. So in all of these instances, you may begin to feel like a big piece of the puzzle is missing. And despite the fact that you're doing your absolute best with the limited information you have available, the chances are you're setting yourself up for overlooking some of the really important factors of the diet, for getting mixed results, and even so far as putting yourself at risk from nutritional deficiencies and a disturbed gut microbiome, all of which are very good reasons to consider seeking the help of a professional and investing in the Monash app. Which brings me nicely onto reason number 2. Wait a minute, do you mean it's not free? So the second biggest reason I've come across for people not using the Monash app is because you have to pay for it. Now I know that's a shocker in this day and age when there's so much free information available, but just before you dismiss it completely, there are a couple of things you need to consider. So firstly, the money is put directly back into the Monash University research programme. So that means that the information that's available to IBS sufferers such as you and I is constantly being retested and refined and improved and updated. And quite regularly, those updates are reflected in the app itself. So currently the app is priced at around a one-off payment of £8 on Apple and around £6 on Android, which is roughly this much in other currencies. Now I don't know about you, but I have definitely spent way more than that in my time on over-the-counter medications, supplements, probiotics, superfoods, nutritional analysis, allergy testing and much more, all in the search of some blessed relief. Now please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that having the Monash app magically does away with the need for all of these things, but what it does do is give you a way to help yourself in the long term by identifying your triggers and by gradually learning your tolerances and your thresholds, rather than simply relying on these external factors to swoop in when you're in the middle of a flare-up and to remedy your symptoms purely in the short term. Now I understand that not everybody has this type of money to spend on an app, and if this applies to you, then I really do urge you to speak to your doctor or another professional who's going to be able to help get you into the system where you can take full advantage of any free or reduced price information or services that are available to you either through the NHS or are covered possibly by your health insurance. But for those people that do have the money to invest and are purely just questioning the value of the app, I can categorically say that if you have the money to spend, then this will be the single best investment you can make for your IBS health in terms of a low FODMAP diet. And if it's anywhere within the realms of possibility for you to invest in the Monash app, then I recommend you do everything you can to make that happen and do it sooner rather than later in your low FODMAP journey. And the third reason that you may feel like having the Monash app is completely unnecessary is because of all of the free information available online at the click of a button. Now, I'll admit this is exactly what I did as soon as I realised that the limited information I've been given by my dietitian just wasn't going to cut it, and it's absolutely true. You can Google low FODMAP diet and in less than a few hours you can come up with a meal plan, a safe foods list, have joined a low FODMAP support group and have a month worth of recipes all at your fingertips, all for free. But here's the thing, I can pretty much guarantee that virtually every piece of that information has been produced based on the Monash app and has been designed to be used in conjunction with an up-to-date version of the Monash app, as well as under the direct supervision of a FODMAP trained dietitian. And I challenge you now to go back to the source of that free information and not find a disclaimer of words to that effect. And as we've already established, Monash are constantly retesting foods, perfecting their research and updating their information. So the chances are, if anything you've come across is more than a year old, then it's likely already out of date, and it is just not feasible to expect people to continuously be going back and updating blog posts and YouTube videos in accordance with the latest updates from Monash. So does this mean that the wealth of information we come across online is useless? Absolutely not. I wouldn't be here speaking to you today if I believed that. But what it does do is highlight the need for you to take full responsibility that the information you're using is accurate, especially if it's being used to influence your decisions when it comes to your health and diet. And this is all working on the basic assumption that that information was accurate to begin with. Because let's face it, the things you come across in the deepest, darkest corners of the internet, when you're frantically Googling at 2 a.m. because you just want to get rid of these symptoms, are not always likely to be 100% reliable or 100% correct. So please, please, please double check everything to the best of your abilities. And incidentally, one of the easiest and quickest ways to do that is by cross-referencing with the Monash app, and then just for good measure, run it by your dietitian or health professional just to be sure. So if you're still undecided as to whether you need the Monash app to help you through a low FODMAP diet, then I highly recommend that you go on over to the Monash FODMAP blog. Take full advantage of the wealth of free articles and information that they have on there, and get yourself really familiar with the style and the types of information that our friends at Monash are working really hard to present to IBS sufferers the world over. So if you like what you see and you believe that this might just be the missing link in your journey towards improved gut health, then I highly recommend that you download the app today, and I'll leave the links for that down below. Now here's the disclaimer, I am in no way sponsored, endorsed or compensated by Monash for recommending their product. It's purely just one IBS sufferer speaking to another and recommending something that I feel is the easiest, most accurate way to take control of your symptoms. Now, for my FODMAP friends out there that don't have access to a smartphone, you'll be really pleased to hear that Monash actually do a printed version. Now, I've never seen one for myself, so I can't vouch for the fact that all of the information in the app will actually be available in the booklet form, but if it's the only option available to you, then it is a good place to start. Now, the downsides that I can see to having the printed version versus the app are that it's unlikely that the printed booklets are going to be updated and reprinted as often as the app. Also, it does seem to appear that the booklets focus much more on the basics of following a low FODMAP diet rather than including the really comprehensive foods list that the app is well known for. And also it seems as if the booklets, if you're purchasing them one-on-one, are the same price or perhaps even more expensive than the app, but just for less information. So however, I will leave a link for the printed version down below if that's the one that's available to you. It's also worth mentioning that these booklets are available to health professionals at a discount for buying in bulk. So it might be worth waiting until you've seen your dietitian to see if they're going to supply one of these booklets to you for free, or mentioning it to them at your next appointment to see if they've got any intention of purchasing a bulk batch of these booklets and then passing those savings on to you as the patient. So what do you think? After hearing all that, do you believe that you need the Monash app to do a low FODMAP diet, or are you still determined to go it alone? Either way, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and I'd also like to know that if any of the topics that we've touched upon today you'd like to see in more detail in future videos. You can do that either via the comments below, or you can drop me a private message either on my email or over on Instagram. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!